So recently there was a case in the UK where there was somebody working in the NHS as a nurse was fired from her role due to a few reasons, and I just thought that this is something that we don't really actively discuss on YouTube as a community of healthcare professionals working in the UK. We're obviously talking a lot about what happens and how you can land a job in the UK, get your HCPC registration, but we don't talk about what happens when you get fired from a role in the NHS and what are your options if you are on a work visa. So in today's video, I will be decoding the top 4 reasons why people have been let go from their jobs or have been fired from their jobs in the UK while working under the healthcare system, and what you can do if this might happen to you or somebody that you know. But before we move ahead, my name is Nikita and I make videos about working in the UK as a healthcare professional and landing those roles. And if you are somebody who's interested in life in the UK as a healthcare professional generally, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, but also drop me a follow on Instagram. My handle is Physiotherapy in UK. So let's get into the reasons first. So I've got my handy laptop with me again and I have jotted down a few points, so you will see me looking down a couple of times, but I just wanted to let you know that if you have been let go from your job or if you do get fired from your role, it is not the end of the world, and I will be giving you a few options and tips on what you can be doing instead at the end of this video. But firstly, let's talk about one of the first reasons why you might be let go of your role. So the first and the most common thing that can happen within the healthcare sector generally is not meeting your competencies and poor performance. Now, when I say competencies, these are the baseline requirements required for you to fulfill your role. Now, this don't only include clinical aspects, it might include things related to admin as well. And it might include even gross professional related competencies related to the role of you working as a part of the team. Now, one of the most common examples of you not meeting your competencies would mean that you are not keeping up with CPD within the UK, which is continuous professional development. The second reason might be that you're continuously making errors in clinical judgment. Now, if you are in a prescribing role, for example, a doctor or a nurse, and if you are prescribing medication, if you're not prescribing correct medication, but if you are in a healthcare role, maybe you're not prescribing adequate equipments or suggesting adequate therapies that might be helpful for the person. The third reason might be just poor decision making and clinical skills. So if you are working in the UK and your supervisor or your mentor feels that you're not meeting the clinical requirements of the role, that could be another reason where you're not meeting your competencies. And finally, one of the most common ones in terms of competencies is poor documentation. Now, I know that obviously the documentation styles in the UK can look so different as compared to our home countries in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Turkey, but we've got to upgrade ourselves and get ourselves up to the documentation standards within the UK. Now, so these are one of the most common reasons why you might be called on competencies for poor performance. And again, if that does happen, do remember that as a supervisor will be contacting you, they will set up formal performance improvement plan to help you improve your performance across the areas that have been raised as concerns. The second reason why you might be let go from your job or fired from your job, and this was something that the recent NHS nurse was called upon, was breach of confidentiality and breach of professional codes and ethics. Now, as a part of this common mistake, a lot of us working in the NHS have registered with regulatory bodies such as the HCPC, the NMC, etc. And as a part of it, we have very strict codes of conduct. Some of the most common mistakes related to this sort of problem can be things like falsifying information on patient records, accessing patient records where you're not given authorization and for no appropriate reasons, maybe even not respecting confidentiality and sharing information on social media, and finally, any inappropriate behavior against staff or colleagues that are working with you. All of this comes along the lines of maintaining your professional boundaries and conducts and can be a common reason for firing or being let go in the NHS. The third most common reason is misuse of sick absenteeism. Now, in the NHS, we are very lucky to have very good number of days of annual leave, and our sick leave is considered on top of that. So it's not accounted for in your annual leave, which I think is great because I used to work in India and it used to be all considered a part of the same annual leave or the total leave we had for the year. But as a result of this, there are many people who misuse their leaves in the UK. One of the common reasons might be that people are applying for leaves just before the weekend, or if they notice these patterns, they might call you out on it. Another reason could be that people are using their leaves for personal travel or leisure purposes, especially sick leaves. And if your employer notices these patterns and calls you out on it, and if they do have a bit of an inquiry on it, and they found you guilty, then that could lead to your dismissal. And one of the final problems that can lead to dismissal is communication and cultural differences. Now, don't get me wrong, when you start working in the NHS as an internationally trained healthcare professional, most of your teams are going to be super supportive and will help you to integrate better into the system. But despite their best efforts, if you are not getting on with the clinical systems, the styles of documentation, the MDT work that is expected out of each and every one of us in the UK, it can lead to misunderstandings which might impact patient care, which might not be improved despite all of the trainings that you are undergoing. Now, one of the most common examples we've had recently in the NHS is again people not having very good language skills when they come from countries such as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. This is not to say that all people don't speak well, but the problem is that when you are giving a handover to a colleague, if they do not understand you well enough, they will flag it up with your manager or your supervisor and puts you in a bit of an awkward or an uncomfortable spot. Another common example is misunderstanding local policies and patient consent processes. Because if you are not gaining consent adequately from a patient or are documenting it wrong, then it can have a direct impact on patient care, which is not ideal in the NHS. Now that we've covered some of the common reasons why people are fired from their jobs or dismissed or let go from their jobs, let's talk about what happens in the process. Now, you've got to understand that if you are on a work visa in the UK, your work visa is directly tied to your employment and your employer. And if for whatever reason your employment is terminated, your work visa will also be terminated. As soon as you or your employment has been terminated, your employer has to give the Home Office or the UKVI a notice, and that is usually sent within 10 days of your termination. So one of the things that the UKVI will then do is look at the reasons for the termination, and they can then issue you with something known as a curtailment letter. The curtailment letter basically will be emailed out to you or posted out to you, but it then says that you have only up to 60 days to find alternative employment or find a way to stay in the UK. Now, once you've received this letter, you have basically three options. Let's talk about option one. The first thing that you can do is find another sponsored job. Now, obviously, you can find another sponsored job, but to do this, what you need to do is update your applications, your job applications, whether that's for the NHS or for the private sector. And if you are interested in finding out more about how you can make good applications to the NHS, feel free to check out this video, which has an entire bucket load of information through the playlist. But once you've updated your applications, what you want to do is try and land a sponsored role as quick as possible, and make sure that once you've completed those employment checks, they issue you with a certificate of sponsorship, and that you've applied for your new visa within 60 days of losing your job or receiving your curtailment letter. Now, a pro tip over here and something worth remembering is that if you have received your certificate of sponsorship, please do not wait for those 60 days to get over. You can apply for your new skilled worker visa based on the new certificate of sponsorship anytime before the 60 days expire. The second option you have is try to switch to another visa. So say, for example, if you were on a skilled worker visa, which does include the health and care worker route, then you can switch over to another visa. Now, there are a few options over here. The first option you might have is go on to a student visa. The second option you might have is go on to a spouse or a dependent visa. The third option is the global talent visa that might be available. And the fourth is the innovator founder visa. Now, all of these visas have different criteria and categories, and I don't want to take up too much time in this video, but if you do have questions about any of them, do let me know in the comments below, and I'll try and make a follow-up video about this sooner. The third option that you might have is you might have to leave the UK. Now, again, this is not something a lot of people want to hear, and it can be super stressful. But what you might have to do is consider leaving the UK if your 60 days are up and you've not been able to do anything else or secure any other visa options. Now, the reason why this option is recommended following the 60-day period is because if you continue to live in the UK illegally beyond the 60 days, then it might impact your further visa application. Say, for example, if you go on a legal route, or it might even impact your ILR and your citizenship, which is really not ideal. So make sure that if you've gone over the 60 days, it's best for you to leave the UK and again consider coming back through a different route or a different visa option. Now, I hope this video was useful, guys. Do let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.